there is a brotherhood. I mean, there is not one person on the job that wears this uniform that I wouldn't go out here and lay my life down for. I mean, we do the job and we understand how dangerous it is. And when you hear a brother or sister on, on the radio calling for help, you don't think about what color they are, what language they speak different. They're doing the same thing you're doing. They're making the same sacrifices you're doing. And you're rushing to them. And you're going to run over anybody that gets in the way to get to them.
Would meet and sit at the YWCA, which I told you on Clare Street. And a gentleman there, we knew him, Bill Coles, who was the editor, I should say, of the Star magazine here in Rochester. And he came and says, they won't let colored be on the Rochester Police Department. Well, most of us who were there at that time were either born or raised in Rochester here. And we said, you're full of the crap.
The Academy does a really good job of teaching you how to defend yourself, when to use your gun, when not to. It tells you a lot about protocol and how to fill out reports. But it doesn't teach you stuff that you really need to know. And that is how to be respectful of people, how to remain humble with people. And those things, to me, those things are key to doing a good job as a police officer.
I have seen several times when white cops are actually more accepted by the community than black cops are. I think the reason being is that the assumption is made that regardless of where a black cop grew up or what part of the world he may have come from, that if he's dealing with the black community and they're doing something the community doesn't care for so much, that he has turned traitor against his people.
I think it's a culture shock to the black officer because he is viewed upon differently than a regular, African American citizen. You take people's fears away from them, and they adapt. And I think, many people in the black community who have been afraid of police officers from, stereotypes or news stories, see more black officers coming on, and they're not sure where they're coming from and why they're there.
Caught between the rock and a hard place. And the color of my face. Caught between the rock and a hard place.
Take out from the other 72 Shelter Street, USA 50 Park.
To be black, to black, to be blue, to blue, to be black, to black, to be blue, to blue.
Suspicious vehicle, 1450 Lake Avenue. A white castle.
Male black, 6 foot, red shirt, small dress.
Well, it clearly is racism in the department, and I can tell you, I don't even have to go to any example other than just look at promotions. When blacks are promoted in our police department, they serve longer, they get what I would say assignments that aren't the type of assignments that will garner a quick promotion, that the opportunities for things like overtime are different than it is for other officers that are white. We have a lot of things in the system that most people would not understand unless they worked in the system. And me, working with police officers in my role, I see it clearly. And there was a point where under Ron Evangelista, when their union, I went to him and I said, for black events, I want to see black officers working overtime hours. I don't want to see the older white officers, because it's not fair that when we have events that we still can't get our guys working. And he agreed to that. And then, I'm going to have the same conversation with Mike. Same thing, that when there are black events, I expect to see black officers having an opportunity for overtime. So there's definitely racism in the department, very institutionalized racism. When you look at promotions, opportunity to serve on things like tactical and things like that, that they don't get the same opportunities as everybody else. when you look at our hiring practices, the fact of the matter is that the test really is not that hard, that we've systematically eliminated people of color for very minor offenses when those same offenses get weighed for white officers or white recruits. I mean, we have a lot of stuff going on in our department. And I wouldn't say it's just Rochester, there are other places that have similar history.
Well, if we look at the U.S. Constitution, there's no doubt about it. I mean, anybody who actually reads it, it says straight out in there that, that black people are worth less than white people. It even says women are worth less than white men. So, absolutely. I guess if you take that as the basis for all law in the U.S., then absolutely, that's going to carry over into all law. As far as the idea that does the New York State set of laws, collective laws, regardless of what they are, does that collection specifically target minorities? I really can't say.
Problem on the minority side is the consent decree is written to be consistent with the federal statute that defines minority. And the federal statute that defines minority defines, I mean, you're gonna hire someone who looks like me. And if I'm from the right country, I'm a minority. So the community looks at the graduating class and goes, I don't see people who look like me. I don't see black folks in that picture. And you could have hired the 25% minority that you had to hire. But you end up hiring people who are not reflective of the community. And if the consent decree could be rewritten, and I don't think in the political climate that we have today it can be, but if it could be, it should be rewritten to say, reflects the population of the community with regard to race. And that would take care of it. You wouldn't have guys from Colombia, South America coming here and being, I'm a minority, so, even though I scored low, you got to hire me. And you do. Right. Because that's the rules.
They're effective as much as you want to make them effective. And we've seemed to have ignored them. We had an opportunity to really put those things to work when we hired a bunch of people because of attrition. And we didn't. I stopped going to graduation classes because I got tired of seeing the same old white faces. And that's not to say that I have an issue with white people. I have an issue with not doing diversity and purposely not doing it. That's the issue I have.
I will say that, yes, affirmative action very definitely influences departmental policies. And departmental policies in some cases extend further beyond affirmative action. And by that, what I'm saying specifically is, and please don't take this the wrong way because I absolutely love the guy that was picked up as a result of this. But when my academy class started, we were one day into the class and somebody dropped out. So they were replaced with a black man. About 3 months later, we were all standing around comparing our scores on the civil service exam. And every single white officer in the room had scored 100 on the civil service exam. And when we asked the fellow who came in as the replacement, this black man, what he scored, he said, I scored a 73. I had two very close friends who had also scored 100 on the civil service exam who weren't even looked at. Now at that point, I was really pretty livid because my understanding was the exam was put in place to provide the best possible candidates, and yet we were overlooking people who had tested out as being the best possible candidates in order to balance the color scale. That's racism. There is no such thing as reverse racism. There's just racism. It just depends on what direction it's pointed.
It exists because we don't acknowledge it. I think if you want to destroy it, you have to acknowledge that it exists. And I think that a lot of people believe because we have a black chief that, it must not exist because the guy leading the department is black. But that has nothing to do with the people who served in the department, 30 years or 20 years who have been, practicing what I would say things that they were taught by people who upheld racist practices. And so, we have black leadership, but we don't have the same opportunity under that leadership.
It's easy to write, must have a high school diploma. Well, how do you write must not be racist, must be equal-minded, must be fair-minded? I mean, you know, when you see people like that, you look for something, I did anyway, or I had my people, look for some other way to keep them not there, because it's not what we need. You know, remember in the academy how they teach you how you're trained is how you'll react under stress. And being a racist or a sexist is part of how we're trained when we're growing up. And when we're under stress, which there's a lot of on the job, that's going to come out.
At some level, every single one of us is a little bit racist. And it shows itself in the culture into which we choose to settle ourselves. We may be enculturated some way, and we may cross cultural boundaries, and we may enjoy ourselves crossing cultural boundaries, but when it comes right back down to it, we return to our zone of comfort, which in and of itself may include a certain amount of racism.
I think it's covert, and I think it's hidden behind institutional racism, and then some individual biases, and that's again because of ignorance. I think it's more so ignorant than it is just outright racism, and that's on both sides, black and white. You know, some black officers not knowing some things, you know, then they say, oh, well, that's just white culture, you know, or white officers saying, oh, well, that's just black culture.
African American police officers seem to be something of an after thought as opposed to a proactive policy and practice. Yeah, I know there are advertisements. I know there is maybe some kind of preparation coursework offered, but by and large, the community, not just the Rochester Police Department, but the community in terms of all of the institutions, certainly the schools, have not been very aggressive and consistent about making sure that the police force reflects the community both in terms of pigmentation, but also appreciation for how the community how Rochester has developed.
I left Kodak, and it was in December of '47. Yeah, December '47. Right at Christmas. Something always happens around Christmas time.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a special time.
So I went in, and they said, well, we want you to do some undercover work. What do you mean? We want you to go down into the colored neighborhood and see about the after-hour joints and all. I laughed at him. I says, hey, I've been going to them right along. They know me. When I walked in, all the people know me. I'm Charlie Price.
Charles Price, your first African-American police officer, was a graduate of Madison High School in 1941 or 42, I guess it was. And he was drafted. But the major part of this is that he eventually becomes an intelligence officer.
I thought of it. I said, here they're using me as a tool. As we always say, as an Uncle Tom or Sam, you know. But most of the guys, as I said before, if they had an after-hour joint, I knew who they were, and they knew who I was. When I'd walk in.
It was the black officers in the black community trying to better the community. So I don't know how you're being Uncle Tom. It's your community you're trying to better. So I don't understand that whole phrase, or like say Uncle Tom doing the man's work. I mean, if doing the man's work is trying to help better your community, I guess that's going to be there for a while then.
In the late 47s, that was when we had the influx of a lot of people coming from the South, coming up here who had gotten jobs or working on the farms out here. We used to call them like the bean pickers. They were brought up here to do the farm work. Now, they did not know me. they just saw this colored fella in a uniform. Now, to just give you a good example of difference there. Now, the white officer who I was teamed with, his name was George DeVos. They used to call him George all the time. Okay, George. What do you think they called me every time? It was Price. Now, the difference between calling him first by his first name and they calling me by my last name, it kind of got me sometimes. I'm saying, is there a difference here? Right? But as I say, the ones who were in that influx that came in, they did not know Charlie Price. But the ones who did, if I come down the street and say hi something, hey, hi Charlie, and I'd be saying, hi Bill, hi this or that, how's your mother, how's this? It was a different rapport, shall I say.
What do you think are some of the strengths of the Rochester Police Department?
I think that we have a number of great strengths. Number one, it's our people. I mean, in terms of the people that we have phenomenal people in the Rochester Police Department that are intelligent, that are committed, that are willing to be engaged. I think that a lot of times what people don't know is the great things that our people do. And, you know, when I talked all of last year about community engagement, it wasn't that I was trying to get our people to do something new. It was really about letting the community know this is what we do. And I think we did a good job of getting that message out, and we will continue to do that.
Leadership seems to believe that people want to see people on the street. Yes, but they want to see people on the street interacting. Just to put somebody on the street so that they're visible is not the job. Right. You have to put people on the street that are going to talk to that person on the corner, talk to that merchant, talk to the old lady sitting on the porch, people who just naturally interact. We're not asking them to go out there and do anything dangerous, but just know the folks that you're dealing with. Because in doing that, you're going to realize when you get to a particular scene who the players are and who the players aren't. And a lot of times they confuse the two. And so the people you press are not the criminal, it's somebody who you think looks like the criminal. Right. And creating a relationship where people can interact with the community regularly, those lines don't become blurry. They become much more clear about who you have to police and who you need to have a relationship with.
If you're policing inner city, majority of folk that you're going to step out with are black or Hispanic, then you're automatically behind the 8 ball as a white officer, because no matter what you say or do, you're probably going to be perceived as the man trying to keep us down. Holy smokes, man, they got the whole street. They got all of Hess, all of Monroe Avenue, up to like Oxford boxed off. When you throw race into the factor, now it's a racial thing. You know, because you don't understand, or because you don't want to understand, and you're the man trying to keep me down. And then if I come in as a black officer and say that, then I'm Uncle Tom, and I'm not really black.
I think it's a culture shock to the black officer, because he is viewed upon differently than a regular, African American citizen. And with any experience of coming on this job and learning how to deal with people, as time goes on and you experience more things, you take people's fears away from them and they adapt. And I think, many people in the black community who have been afraid of police officers from, stereotypes or news stories, see more black officers coming on, and they're not sure where they're coming from and why they're there.
I have seen several times when white cops are actually more accepted by the community than black cops are. I think the reason being is that the assumption is made that regardless of where a black cop grew up or what part of the world he may have come from, that if he's dealing with the black community and they're doing something, they being the cop is doing something the community doesn't care for so much, that he has turned traitor against his people. Whereas if it's a white cop who's issuing the ticket and it's a an unpopular thing, or is making the arrest and it's unpopular in the neighborhood. It's just accepted that the cop doesn't come from the neighborhood, and so therefore he doesn't understand what's going on. So I actually see more discrimination on behalf of the citizens towards cops of any ethnic group than I do within the department itself.
I guess it's a given that a certain number of civilian, or a certain amount of the civilian population would desire, and in certain moments of confrontation would try to use that on a black police officer when he or she is in the process of arresting a black suspect. That's a weakness, and it occurs not just in law enforcement, but elsewhere as well. It's apparently a hazard that police officers are going to have to put up with for a time, because again, the sense of inferiority prevalent in a lot of African American enclaves is going to continue to have people making those calls. I believe the police officer, whatever his pigmentation or background, uses much of his intelligence as possible to see what has happened and therefore make his decision to arrest or impair, prevent further action on the part of the people that he's facing, do the job.
I've seen this police department become much more diversified, in the time that I came on. And, as a police officer, I like that. As a supervisor, I have a very diverse group of people working for me. And, I enjoy that. With diversity, comes the opportunity and the ability to address problems, in several different ways. I don't want my squad of, 8 officers to be all Paul Grandy. I want them to be different, have different backgrounds, different cultures. The unique part of this job is you're dealing with different people from every aspect.
I grew up in a small town that was essentially white, locked in the mountains of Northern California. And because of that, I don't live within, and I have never functioned within, the inner city predominantly black culture, aside from coming in and going to work for 40 hours a week. I'm able to function within it. I don't necessarily understand it. I don't live in it, and I don't choose to live in it. There are officers that I know who grew up in this culture. As a matter of fact, 2 of my closest friends grew up in that same inner city, predominantly black culture. And when I put on my uniform, when they put on their uniform, we're at work, we're together. We're not functioning within our various cultures. Me as a, as a white guy living on a farm in the country, and they as urban city dwellers who still enjoy some of the things that, like the music, the step shows and that sort of thing. That's not what defines who we are when we come together at work. When we come together at work, we're cops.
We are a product of our society, and so you're going to have perceptions that hold true to your culture. If you're a white officer raised in, a white community with very limited experience or exposure or contact with another culture, it don't have to be black or white. It could be just another culture, whatever. Then you're going to find that you hold to the perceptions that may be the mainstream ideology. and that is, well, you know, if all black people are lazy, then you're going to see them that way because that's your reality. That's what you were told. You don't know anything differently. So it's for you to come out and become a part of the society around you. You know, to embrace and try to entrench yourself into their culture so that you can understand that, hey, you know what, we are the same. You know, we don't really have anything that's separate other than the skin color.
And I had a captain when I first went on, Captain O'Leary. I'll never forget him. I was walking Joseph Avenue, let's say where they put me, as they call it, the gut at that time. And two white individuals, this is around 2 o'clock in the morning, raced a car down Nassau Street, and they saw me and used the N-word towards me as a police officer. I did not know that Captain Leary was there. He was out of uniform, but he was in his car. He took off, caught him, and brought him back to me. And I'm standing there, and he said, "You apologize to my officer." And my thought of that captain went right to the ceiling, because he came for my house. That's when I said I could feel the blue and blue. It wasn't black and blue or white and blue, blue and blue.
There is a brotherhood. I mean, there is not one person on the job that wears this uniform that I wouldn't go out here and lay my life down for. I mean, we do the job and we understand how dangerous it is. And when you hear a brother or sister on the radio calling for help, you don't think about what color they are, what language they speak differently. They're doing the same thing you're doing. They're making the same sacrifices you're doing. And you're rushing to them. And you're going to run over anybody that gets in the way to get to them. That's just the way it is, because nobody can understand, what it is to be a cop unless you've been a cop. You can tell family, you can tell friends, and there are supportive folk. There are people that that appreciate us and love us. We're not saying that, you'll never be able to embrace those that wear the badge, but to understand what it means to put on the uniform and then go out and enforce laws that we all vote for and subscribe to bring order to our society. It's a very different look. It's something that's hard to describe, because we don't do what's normal. When bullets are flying, people run away. We run towards it. When there's a fight, people are running away. We're running into it. So, danger is a part of our job, and we don't look at it in the same light. We look that we have to be the ones that go out there and try to stop and save those that can't stop being a victim or can't save themselves from being a victim. We feel it's our job, it's our duty, it's something we were born to do. So when I say, black or white, when you put on the uniform, we don't see it. We see it as blue. And that's why, it's so much of a descriptive thing when you say the thin blue line, is because, that's what we are. We're that thin blue line between good and bad. And when we stand on it, we stand together. We don't back down. We can't back down.
I think it's a combination of things, because one, we do have to understand that there's a reason why we need the police department. That we do have criminals out here who do bad things. We have people who kill people. We have people who deal drugs and destroy communities. I get why we need our police department. But in the same token, they have to be smart on crime, not tough on crime. Tough on crime has gotten us nowhere. It's sexy, it sounds great for people who want action, but that's just like swinging at 10 people to hit one. That's what we've been doing. And then using that as an excuse to say, okay, we're doing a good job.
We were walking home from the bus stop. Cop stops us, asks for our ID, searches us. From what I could tell, there's no apparent reason why.
You have all these stereotypes. Most of us tend to look at the worst of all stereotypes that you hear. There's always two sides of the coin, good and bad, or positive, negative, but most people tend to dwell on the negative.
When I came on the job, I heard people come to teach our class, captains and big boss guys, you know, and I hear them come in and they'd say, it doesn't matter if you're racist as long as you don't act like that. It doesn't matter, you know, what your core beliefs are, as long as you don't act in a prejudicial way towards people. And I think they're wrong. Because I think that in the heat of the moment, we are who we are and we act on some of our beliefs. And I don't think any number of times that somebody in the classroom says to you, I don't care what your real beliefs are, just act nice. How you really feel is what's going to come out and what's going to show. So when you say, is it policy? I don't think anybody in policy says, oh, it's okay to be rude, or it's okay to be racist, or a sexist, or misogynist, and blah, 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 all those ists. I think that it's there because it's there in the people. And it's there in the people because, as policy, the department's allowed to hire people who they see that in.
You get these people who are hired as bosses who have no skills or training in dealing with people. It's just based on tenure. So that can be the same thing maybe with the police force. You need to have more tests in order to become a police officer, you know, as far as having social skills wise. You know, versus taking a written exam and being able to shoot the gun and passing the physical. Maybe there needs to be some more of education involved in it. Maybe that won't happen.
The hiring policies of the city of Rochester are inherently racist. I've already discussed where I've known white candidates who, by the measuring stick held up by the city, were the top candidates for the job and were bypassed to hire minorities. And again, in my mind, that's a racist action. Now, in regards to the idea of removing candidates who perhaps have racist bents or are just straight out racist, regardless of in what manner, I truly believe it's impossible to set up a policy that can prevent the hiring of somebody who's that way. The primary reason that I see is because legislation has become so strong in the last 50 years regarding racism that anybody who carries those feelings with them learns to hide them. And it only comes out at opportune moments.
We have to really do real training. It can't be, one class. This has to be trainings where we put people in scenarios to understand, one, our community, and two, to understand how to address our community. In the black community, there's one violation you cannot do, and that's disrespect somebody's mother. We know growing up, you can say whatever you want about my dad. You say something about my mother, that means that we're gonna fight. And I've seen all white officers go into communities and challenge or even disrespect people's mothers. Tell them to shut up, go back in the house. I mean, if you have an understanding, if you have cultural competency, you know that's nothing you do. You can't do that. And so you have to make sure that you have a population of people who are constantly training on these types of scenarios so that when they come into our community, that they're not doing things that they deem as a job that could be offensive to us. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't police us. I'm saying the way you police, you should understand the population of people you're policing, because the tension could be erased if they just understood that. But there seems to be no real effort to even train people on how to police in our community, how to learn about the folks that live there.
It would have to be done really, really well. And the department years ago tried an in-service training on diversity training, and it was horrible. It was one of the biggest jokes they spent tons of money on. It was dreadful. And people walked away from that with a really bad taste in their mouth.
With the advent of more, shall we say, an overwhelming number of television opportunities beamed at us, and the subsequent diminishment of families sharing with their children how we got over, and at the same time, collaborations with the schools. It's a two-way street.
Right.
Without that kind of foundation, we are always handicapped in terms of providing a police force that looks like the community. And every other endeavor that makes for good community. Community is like coming together, sharing, come to unity is what it's about. And that's an active command. You have to be active about that and persistent, and you have to know whom you're dealing with and incorporate some of that history into whatever you're going to do to recruit or train.
I think it needs to be something we do in the academy, help people learn a little bit better. There's a program that Mayor Johnson participated in years ago, and it partnered white executives with African American executives, one-on-one partnerships. And the point was, let me learn about your world. And these guys and women met, I think, once a month or twice a month, and they'd go to lunch together, or they'd do this, they'd do that, and then they'd have group discussions about stuff, and to help them get that diversity that they probably didn't get as kids. And I think that that's the kind of training and exposure that would help people.
Once the people in that area know who you are, then they begin to trust. I mean, one of the biggest things a police officer does in an area that he works is he deals with the people every day, and with the same people every day. And when I came out and we had the patrol sections, the 7 patrol sections, I was in my beat, which was probably 2 square miles, and I knew everybody there, and they knew who I was. After the trust began, of me being consistent, letting the people of that community know, what my expectations were, and following the mission of the police department, trust was gained. And not that everybody is necessarily going to like you, because let's face it, if somebody runs a red light and they get a ticket, or they break the law, in any way, and the law is enforced, they're not happy with what they have to do. But you learn with time to make them understand where you're coming from, and most people who are reasonable understand you're doing your job. I think that part applies to the black officer too.
The police officer has a role like the teacher, and I think like the school teacher, and I think the police officer may well be ahead of the situation, but there are gaps in the preparation of both. And as the leadership, maybe we're not just the chief, but certainly city council, as they work around trying to grab hold of this thing, if they can come and look at that aspect of it, maybe they can also be an influence on both the way police officers are recruited, trained, and assigned, but also the way teachers are trained and assigned.
I think there may be some officers who are better prepared to deal with that based upon their own education, but our job as police officers is not that of an educator. It's not that of a social justice activist. Our job is to enforce the laws. The laws are, and to use a term that has been thrown around rather heavily, the laws are black and white. You've got the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. And officers are quite well equipped to use discretion and function within the spirit of the law when the situation warrants it. And officers are quite well equipped to deal with the letter of the law when the situation requires it. But education, social activism, that's not our job.
What the Rochester Police Department and the mayor is looking at, and ever since becoming chief, I talk about exploring having an entity downtown, and I think we're taking that next step in terms of us having a presence in the downtown area, much more than just having officers leave, say, the West Division and go downtown. We're looking at having a downtown presence in terms of where we work out of, and we're exploring that opportunity.
It was a hardy boy mission in charge to unravel. Sounds from the sarge, sometimes it's pure babble. But back to the gravel, we comb the blocks. Looking for the predators that roam the blocks. Not a gang or taxpayer outsmart the fox. It's the red tape and politics that run the flocks.
Sidewalk, get on the sidewalk.
Black to black to be blue, to blue to be black, to black to be blue, to blue to be black, to black to be blue, to blue to be black, to black to be blue, to blue to be black, to black to be.
I feel that most people expected the police to be white. I didn't feel that the blacks had the opportunity to come onto a civil service job and do that. And as it increased, I think again, the trust issue, where's this person coming from, made it difficult for the officers at first to come in, feeling, is this person here to betray me as a black person because he's a police officer? And again, like anybody else that comes on a job, you don't just walk in with a badge and gun and shiny boots and your hat on and know how to do this job. It takes at least 5 years to really know what you're doing, in this profession. And the way to learn it isn't through books. The way to learn it is dealing with people.
I was a school teacher. And I was teaching my class one day, and I'm looking out the window saying, I really want to work outdoors. And a friend of mine was one of the supervisors in the victims unit, in the Facet unit at the time. And she says, I've got a part-time job opening. Come and fill out an application. So I went to the public safety building, and there was this big sign and said, last day to register for the police exam. I said, what the heck, I'll sign up for the exam too.
Looking at the other aspects of my life now, as well as 15 years ago when I actually did become a cop, now I'm also a minister, and I'm doing that part-time.
Minister?
I'm a minister. And I'm looking forward to taking a church as my retirement job and becoming a full-time pastor.
I definitely grew up in Rochester. I grew up on the west side. Genesee and Sawyer was my neighborhood. I was gang affiliated at that time, like most people who grew up in my neighborhood. And was able to be put on probation at 15, and that changed my life, actually.
I'm from Rochester. Born and raised here, and lived in the Rochester area my whole life. Lived in the city for a good part of my adult life, and I love to have the opportunity to try to make a difference, keeping people safe and locking up bad guys.
They're all supposedly blue. They're still a cop. But as far as respecting them for what they were able to accomplish, they do get a certain amount of respect, yeah.
I think that anytime the community is open to everyone being equal, it's good. I think the fact that when you think that one particular culture should or could only lead, that's a problem. And that was something that was believed years ago, like when Captain Price was in the military, or even when I was in active duty. When you get into the military and you think that blacks should only have subservient roles and not be able to get in and fight, or not be able to be managers or leaders in the military, then you cheat your military. And the police department at one point in time, you had black officers, but they were like, well, you can't arrest anybody but a black person If you're going to arrest a white person, you got to call a white officer.
I had no difficulty in making an arrest, and I got to say that. If I made an arrest, I made the arrest. My name was on the blotter. I brought the guy into the station at the old #1 down on Exchange Street, where the public safety building is now. I would bring him in. The thing that I ran into, a couple of stories are different things I ran into, not having a mentor. Yet I did have something of a mentor, but not a person I could go to all the time, say, how do you do this, how do you do that, or did I do it right? I went up to Buffalo because Buffalo did have a couple of police officers up there that were colored who had been working long before me. Okay. So I couldn't remember, One-Eye Jack or something, his name, he had one eye or something like that. And I went up to see him to ask him. But he could only walk on William Street in Buffalo, where most of the colored people lived at that time. Yeah, back. Okay. I said, well, that's funny. So about 1949, I'm still #1 and only one. I had to take my grandfather south. So I said, I'll go down to Richmond, which was outside where he had, and see, So I went down there and I talked to a black officer down there who was in Richmond, and he could only arrest people of color. Now, if a white man was on his beat and drunk or raising an egg, he had to call a white officer in. And he could not understand that here I am, arresting white, didn't make any difference.
No, I don't believe that that race loyalty overcomes work loyalty. I strongly believe that if you're a cop, you're a cop. And when it comes down to community situations that are possibly inflammatory, that we're cops. We're also people, and we've got our own opinions. But the plan, or the fact remains that work loyalty is paramount. There is nothing that is any greater than work loyalty when it comes to the police department. Once it's shown that you can't be somebody that can be counted on in a situation, and it doesn't matter where that lack of trust comes from, then you're really nothing on this job.
I think the black officers have some of the same issues as the community, but I would say the problem I have with it being reflective is that the makeup of the department is not reflective of the people paying the taxes for those folks to work. Mm-hmm. And so I think they get it twisted in a sense that we have folks that live here, who have the ability to move to other communities, but they live here and they put up with the issues of the city to make it work. Right. They pay taxes, they do all the things that we want good citizens to do, right, only to have a system that's not reflective of the population. Mm-hmm. We're 43% African American, 12% Latino, and our department doesn't reflect that at all. Not one class has ever reflected that. And that's the issue I have with it. And it's not even about white or black. Right. Could you at least live in the city? We don't even have that. I mean, so the majority of our department doesn't even live in the community which pays the tax for these people to provide food for their families, right, and the ability to survive and grow. I mean, that to me is offensive, that we pay a tax, we get a service that to me is questionable at times, mm-hmm, and we get a population of people doing the job who don't really want to even be around us. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think about that. It's like having a chef who don't eat their own cooking. Would you go to that restaurant?
There's a difference between living here or just coming here to be an occupying force. And that's how some people see it. And I'm not trying to criticize people for moving because, truthfully, nobody wants their kids to go to city schools. I mean, I paid for my kids to go through private schools until one of them reached high school and then did go to a city high school and made out fine. But that's expensive. And some people look and say, well, I'm going to pay that. I might as well live out in the suburbs and pay taxes. So, on one hand, I understand people moving out. I really do. I appreciate the pushes and pulls that come with that. On the other hand, if more officers lived here, there would be a whole different I think there'd be a whole different mindset about policing here.
The picture that has been painted of police, and I would say this nationwide, as being a not having the honor that the idea of policing had as when somebody who's my age was growing up with the TV shows which were always painted the police in a very good picture and that sort of thing. I truly believe that these are some of the things that cause the decline in even applicants. In the last 15 years, I've seen applications drop by 80% for our department. And if you're not getting the applicants from the minority groups, how can you ever expect to accurately reflect what's going on around you? And until such time as the community decides that policing is in fact a noble cause, it is an honorable tradition and profession, it doesn't matter how much money you put on the table in front of these people, they're not going to be interested in doing it.
I remember I worked on a day shift, and there was a call for a child abuse, and I was going to go out. And one of the guys says, you know what, don't go. I said, what do you mean don't go? I'm the youth officer, let's go on these. No, don't go. Let us take care of it. And I didn't understand. And when they came back in, 3 of the guys were crying. That baby had been tortured. And they were like, don't do this now. You have a baby. It's going to be harder. And I thought, it can't possibly be harder. I was so wrong. It was harder. But they took care of me on that one day for that one incident. And it was hard for them. And I think that one of the things that is more liberating about being a woman is I can do this. And I think about all the babies who I've met who are already dead. What I'm trying to get to is a lot of your questions are about how do we take care of each other? How do we respect one another? How do we respect the people we serve? If we took better care of one another in-house, if we respected one another more in-house, it'd be so much easier. Maybe we wouldn't need the diversity class.
Though times have changed somewhat, you are still being judged by the color of your skin. And oftentimes that judgment is coming from people of similar color as you. So my children, if you would honor your mother and father, if you would give honor to all those ancestors that made a path for us to trod, stony though it was, you will ensure that the content of your character will be recognized, at least by your people and ultimately by others who you have to go by to get jobs, positions, promotion, whatever.
I believe I have divine powers, and that is, I believe that this is not a job, it's a calling. And I think that every officer that is in uniform, they were cops before they were born. I believe that to be an officer is a special gift, and that a true officer, not ones that have been fired or arrested and are crooked, you know, just like anybody else, you can have a good butcher, you can have a bad one, you can have, you know, good teachers and not so good teachers. I'm saying that there are folk that are able to get into this job and try and do it, but because it was not innately in them naturally, they washed out. I believe that God appoints us as guardians, and that scripturally, you know, we are keepers of the gate. We watch the city and we protect those that aren't able to protect themselves. How we doing?
All right.
Not too bad. What's going on?
This is my house right here, boss.
All right. How you know this young man here?
Pardon me?
How you know this young man right here?
We're headed over to his mother.
No. How do you know the young man? I didn't ask you where you're headed. Yes. Really?
It was a Hardy Boy mission in charge to unravel. Sounds from the Sarge, sometimes it's pure babble. But back to the gravel, we comb the blocks. Looking for the predators that roam the blocks. Not a gang or taxpayer, outsmart the fox. It's the red tape and politics that run the flocks. Put up a grid of the city and connect the dots.
Residents, our meal tickets must protect our stocks. Investments and Glocks, tasers and flak jackets. Interacting with scholars on down to crack addicts. Deadbeat dads vanishing like black magic. Now moms prostitute to survive, and that's tragic. Traffic stops recorded on dashboard cams, or tenants complaining about landlord scams. And that's only part of what's addressed on the beat. Plus there's tension at the station, so we're stressed on the street.
No sweet taste for song that don't eat. Heat rising in the ghetto, sometimes we don't meet. Colder, tired of the odor of the street. Tired of the street lights, tired of the freaks. Tired of the I ain't mean to do it. Help a brother out, man, you ain't really black. You just frontin' for the white man.
Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Dispatch is eyes and ears, that's the way it works. All points bulletin, units stay alert. Patrol car cruising down the strip, got a tip that a dope boy's about to pie flip for a grip.
Jip told the whole story, now we out like Cape Crusaders. Trying to elevate the ranks like elevators. They all hate us, from our disposition is just a job, man, tell them what our mission
to
is.
Protect and serve is our vocation. From tracking a violator of probation to surveilling a location. Hostage negotiations show the patience employed when we avoid violence but no ovation.
Clap, clap, the guns go, fun's never possible. Living in a city where your skin is an obstacle. Whether you a cop or a shop on the front end with bricks in the back, man, it don't mean nothing.
Caught between the rock and a hard place. And the color of my face. Caught between the rock and a hard place. And the color of my face. Charles Price, who's a pioneering member of the force from a youth. I took the path resembling his course and was raised in the neighborhoods I'm paid to patrol. As a group, the pastor at the church prayed for my soul.
Now my partner giving history lessons while we're progressing. Got another perk in back of the car, he ain't confessing. Another brother going on chill, he looking guilty as hell, but at the same time I'm thinking it's ill.
Caught between the rock and a hard place. And the color of my face. Caught between the rock and a hard place. And the color of my face.
Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be
You can send myself from 4615.
to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue. Too blue to be black, too black to be blue.
Oh, another exciting night.